Scott, on a point that not many people are talking about in terms of why Israel and why there is this ceasefire plan being implemented right now in Gaza. Just before this happened, Scott, Israeli media has noted this, and they've said that parties, opposition parties, and figures like Lieberman, Golan, Naftali Bennett, and others have been meeting to topple the government. And I know you, Scott, have talked about Netanyahu's predicament as well as Israel's overall. How about we start with why this ceasefire, why this peace plan has been implemented, and what people might be missing about it as the first phase begins?
Well, first of all, it's a plan that's long overdue. Netanyahu has held on to this conflict because it's in his political best interest to hold on to this conflict. He is in dire political straits on the domestic front. He has he leads a coalition which is not doesn't have peace in its DNA. Let's put it that way. But he's confronted with a political reality in the United States that if he doesn't do what Donald Trump asked him to do at this point in time, American support for Israel is rapidly slipping away. Trump has already publicly noted that Congress is not under the control of Israel the way it used to be. And the whole Charlie Cook, crisis, after Charlie was murdered, you don't have an Israeli prime minister go on TV, not once, but twice, say, I didn't do it. We didn't do it, unless there's an underlying political fear that some people will think you did it. And why would he fear that? Because of, allegations that Charlie Kirk was turning away from Israel, along with a large part of the Christian Zionist, Christian evangelical movement that had long served as Israel's core foundation of support here in the United States. So Netanyahu, by continuing this conflict, may be preserving in the short term, a situation where he avoids being prosecuted in a court of law for corruption by remaining as prime minister. But he was setting up the conditions for the strategic defeat of Israel, and that would have also brought about his political demise. So he needed to find an off-ramp. And this peace plan, which I want to just quickly point out, is Hamas's demands that have been put in place since day one. So Hamas wins. And that's the other thing we have to recognize. Donald Trump simply packaged it and sold it. So now the question is, okay, so he's gone down this path and he's preserving his American foundation, but what about his coalition? I mean, Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, and others are threatening to jump ship. And if that happens, then Netanyahu is in trouble because his government collapses. He's no longer prime minister. He could be arrested and he'll die in prison. I think what we have here is an opportunity for Netanyahu to build a new coalition. He's going to have to dump the far right wing, and he can't survive politically without it. But this peace plan is linked to Netanyahu. And I think Trump can play some behind the scenes role. And I think there's a coalition that can be built, by some of the names that were mentioned, Benny Gantz especially, a coalition that can be built in Israel that allows Netanyahu to remain as prime minister for an interim period while this peace plan is being implemented and put forward. And that's also one way that Trump can control Netanyahu to ensure Israeli compliance, because now Netanyahu's political future, indeed his personal fortune, is dependent upon the success of this. And then once the treaty is solidified, it's run through its phases, Netanyahu can go into exile, receive some sort of amnesty, et cetera. There's a political deal here because on the surface, this is not sustainable. His coalition can't survive. It's about to collapse. And left to his own volition, his political enemies are going to take advantage of that to topple him. So why would Netanyahu agree to this peace treaty? Because it might be the only off-ramp available to him for political survival.
Scott, quickly before I go to the others, you mentioned that this is Hamas's peace plan. Talk about some of those points, those demands that you said were things that Hamas has wanted, because there has been some concern on social media and other places. Some even saying this is surrender. I definitely don't believe that, given how Hamas, I think, was saying that they were fighting up until the very last minute here. But what are these points that you'd like to just illuminate for the audience?
Well, the big thing is the end of the Israeli occupation. Look, let's just be very clear here. There's 1,200 Palestinians in Israeli prison today. One of the Hamas objectives was always to get the release of these people, to include Barghouti, who's going to be released. Barghouti's been in prison for, 20 years now? What's he going to see when he comes out? Because somebody asked me that question. What's he going to see? Ruined Gaza. I said, no, he's going to see Palestine. Barghouti's going to leave prison and set foot in Palestine. Hamas won. Hamas did what nobody else could do. Hamas brought Israel to a standstill. Israel had to accept this deal, and Palestine's being born because of it. And Barghouti's going to step on the soil of free and independent Palestine. That's a Hamas victory. Hamas also is... I mean, that, those are the big ones. No occupation, a Palestinian homeland, freedom to the people out. Hamas is a resistance movement, and this is where all the anti-Hamas people can just go pound sand. It's a resistance movement. It's not a terrorist organization. A resistance movement. And when you are no longer occupied, when you've achieved your goal, you don't need a resistance movement. You need a government. And if it was a surrender, there would be no role for Hamas in a future government. But notice the compromise, not that Hamas made, but that Trump made at the very end. Hamas isn't going away. Hamas will be part of this government. Oh, no. This is a Hamas victory. Now, we still need the peace plan to actually be implemented, and Israel's fully capable of screwing this up. There's a million things that can go wrong, and everything else has to go right. But the notion that this is Hamas surrender, you don't know anything about anything if you believe Hamas surrendered on this one. It's Israel that's made all of the compromise. This is Netanyahu's government. There will never be a Palestinian state. Oh, yeah? Well, guess what? There is now. Hamas will be destroyed. Not really. You couldn't do it. On and on. We can just go back and forth on this. The Palestinian people paid a horrible price. An unbearable price. But their children and their grandchildren will not be children of the camps. The camps are over. Palestine is real. That's a victory.
A couple of things. Number one, what did Algeria lose? 6, 7, 8, 9 million people. A horrendous, look at the numbers here, probably 500,000 or more. But we're looking at some unthinkable numbers. In hindsight and history, with terrible losses, etc., Algeria is an independent country, isn't it? And when you look at it, you'll say that terrible losses, they won, they fought for their freedom. Ask the Algerians if they would prefer that they had not fought and they're still under French rule. No, sadly, it's unfortunate. It's a reality. There are people that fight for their freedom and pay a terrible cost. I'll say this. What does the future look like for Israel? It will be a pariah nation. Who want to, certainly the governments in the West will push, big corporations to throw money in there. People won't want to buy stuff from Israel. Good luck, flying around the world with an Israeli passport and going to restaurants and people find out you're from Israel, you'll be a pariah. The future for Israel is not bright. It is dark. It is bleak. And the future for the Palestine is they paid a price. Provided, we got a long ways to go, provided that we can, maintain this ceasefire and turn it into a permanent, cessation of hostilities. Nothing's guaranteed. And now, if it is bad enough for Israel, they want to pick a fight with Iran and get themselves pummeled by Iranian missiles again. So it's possible, they're doing this so they can go tangle with Iran. But the future looks very, very dark for Israel, and it looks bright for for the people of Palestine, in my opinion.
I definitely agree with Scott. It because of everything that's happened over the last several years leading up to this moment, there's certainly a bigger push now for a Palestinian state. And in fact, there could be a framework inside of this deal that could lead to that. But of course, many are suspicious about Israel. Israel is, of course, delaying things and are kind of behaving as they did at the first ceasefire plan at the beginning of the Trump administration. What do you see here as the important points to note as we move into this phase of what has been seemingly an endless war and genocide in Gaza and the region?
Well, Danny, I too agree with Scott the way he outlined things, but I would emphasize his point that there's many a slip between cup and lip. I think the way he put it, where there are a million ways that Netanyahu can sabotage this or other people can. And so here I am, fresh from watching a most remarkable cabinet meeting in Washington, where every one of those sycophants gave adulatory commendation to the king for having succeeded in this latest deal with Israel and Palestine. Now, I believe that Netanyahu gave this to Trump, okay? So Trump could have a really big wing. Now, I remember earlier this year, something similar like that. Yeah, something very similar happened. And folks were saying, Netanyahu, now he can't possibly go back on this. It's a deal with Trump. How could, well, he did go back on it. So my fear is this will last very, very, not long at all. And that we'll be back to where we were before. And the ephemeral boost in Trump's ratings will last for a couple of weeks. And then when they see what's really happening in Israel, Trump will not have the guts, he will not have the strength to defy Netanyahu from whatever he wants to do. So my suspicion is that Netanyahu has given this to Trump. It's been a big boost. Watch all the sickening sycophancy, flattering, adulation going on at that cabinet meeting this morning. And so Trump is riding high. And will he matter very much? Will it matter very much to him after 2 weeks if things falls apart? Well, it didn't last time. And will he abide by everything that Netanyahu asked him to do? Well, he did last time. So call me from Missouri, the show me state. I'll have to wait and have people show me that this is a real deal, that Netanyahu in the first instance is obliged in some sense to heed.
There was a lot of pressure on Israel in particular, even coming from mainstream channels. Here you had the New York Times talking about Israel cannot go on winning like this. I don't know, it's a very faded title, but I can go to the quote I wanted to pull up. It says, in Israel, though, winning has seemed only to yield more rounds of warfare. Israel is not a victor, but a perpetual fighter. Of course, we could crystal ball what's going to happen in Gaza with a really high chance that things could turn out very badly from here on out after this peace deal.
Well, I mean, that's an accurate statement, except they're not winning. I mean, you're right. There are some victories. I mean, getting Hezbollah to sue for a ceasefire was a victory, but it didn't solve the issue of Hezbollah. Helping create the conditions for the downfall of Assad, victory, but it hasn't solved the issue there. Hamas, not even close to being a victory. Iran, 12 days of war, made for some good headlines, but the issue isn't solved. Netanyahu said the other day that Israel is more isolated today than it has ever been. And to put that statement in perspective, let's walk back to September 2023, before October 7th. I think it was the 12th. My brain might be off by a day or two or a week. But Joe Biden was in India for the G20 meeting, and he stepped forward and said, I am announcing the India, Middle East, European Economic Corridor. And this is going to be a grand and glorious thing. It's going to unite Europe with India through the Middle East, and it's going to bring Israel and Jordan and Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, everybody together, one big happy family. And it's going to be wonderful. And Netanyahu came out the same day and literally said, this is the greatest day in modern Israeli history. Why? Because this was what made Israel viable. If this economic corridor went through, it created the potential for Israel to become, the financial and technological and economic hub of a rejuvenated, revitalized Middle East. And this would give Israel the economic independence it needed to be its own player, to live in peace and harmony. And Netanyahu was all over that. Well, that's dead. Isn't going to happen. Finished. Israel today is isolated. Netanyahu said so. He said, we'll have to learn how to be self-sufficient. But what a joke. Israel can't be self-sufficient. Israel is 100% relied upon the U.S. taxpayer and the largesse of the United States government, which means that Netanyahu is a prisoner of the United States. And the United States is tired of these wars. I mean, we're going to create our own war in Venezuela, a separate issue altogether, but that's a Western Hemisphere war. We're trying to walk away, de-link ourselves from Ukraine, from the Middle East, from Iran, from Taiwan. And Israel's a problem for us because all Israel does is just get embroiled in more and more conflict. But let's also take a look at what happened today. I guess it was yesterday, Vladimir Putin received a phone call from Benjamin Netanyahu, or maybe it was last week. I don't know. It was recently. They're just talking about it today. Ynet's reporting it. And Netanyahu, this is while Russia is just flowing in military equipment into Iran. And Netanyahu said, please pass to the Iranians. We don't want a war. We're not looking for a war. And this is against everything everybody's been talking about. I mean, the betting, the money, if you were betting was Israel's going to be attacking Iran, has to attack Iran. Even the Iranian president said in a session 2 weeks ago, he believes that Israel is going to attack. And now Netanyahu is saying, we're not going to attack. We're not. Now, is this subterfuge? I don't think so. I think we're dealing with a new reality where Israel has to adapt to the fact that by not winning decisively, it's just destroying. Israel is isolated. They don't have the ability to survive self-sufficiently. They need the United States. The United States isn't going to put up with these endless wars. And if you solve the Iranian problem, because Netanyahu told Putin we're ready for a solution, then you solve the Hezbollah problem. And then you can begin to solve the Israeli problem. And now you have Trump solving the Gaza problem. And maybe, while you can't recreate the Middle East, India, Middle East, European economic corridor, you can bring about a modicum of peace and stability that would allow Israel to try and figure out where it is. Because otherwise, if Israel is just basically the fly in the ointment when it comes to peace and stability, the United States is going to walk away from Israel. That's something that Benjamin Netanyahu fears more than anything else.
There's a lot of people, I've seen some, especially the Zionist elements all across social media and the media, claiming this is a major win for Israel, that they've gotten everything they wanted. What's your assessment?
Oh, no, I don't see any wins for Israel right now. I see Israel, they've lost on every front. As far as public relations is concerned, it's a pariah state. People around the world despise Israel, and I don't see how you can survive as a nation in the long term when number one, most of the world hates you. The governments of the West still support them, but the people do not. That's number one. I think additionally, when your economy has come so unraveled that they've got a major problem, and that is, while everyone talks about Benjamin Netanyahu bragging that, I own the U.S. government and I own the U.S. They'll do anything I want. I've got all of this power in the U.S. But the other side of that is, now that Israel's losing everyone else, they're completely beholden to the U.S. government, that they have nothing else. Israel is effectively a welfare state of the U.S. government. So if things ever kind of start to change and adjust, wherein the U.S. government, because of pressure from the American people, can't be as openly, controlled by Israel. Israel's in a world of trouble because they have nowhere else to turn. What a terrible place to be, where you say, yeah, I control the U.S., but I got nothing else. Because if the U.S. ever drops me, I'm done. I wouldn't want to be in that position. So I don't think Israel's in a good position. And I'm agreeing with Scott in that while there's all the appearance that Israel wants to go to war with Israel, with Iran, everybody believes it. That's like the common agreement. Sure, Israel wants to go with Iran. When you look at it, they had a 12 to 14-hour jump on Iran before they got the first punch in, and they still got their clocks cleaned in 12 days. Iran has gotten stronger now. Iran has more information on how to deal with Israel. If Iran can look at Israel and say, in 12 days, I pretty much ran them out of anti-aircraft missiles. If I fire that amount in 3 days, they'll be out in 3 days. So they're in no position to go toe-to-toe. May they go toe-to-toe with Iran again? It would be a military debacle of historic proportions. And they may. I just don't see how they could possibly do it.
Netanyahu is a pariah. He's sort of driven into a corner here. And for a guy with nuclear weapons, that's really dangerous. Now, one thing is simply his political position in Israel. There is a prison with a bridal suite all prepared for Netanyahu and his wife. What happens if there is peace? Well, most people tell me that he ends up there in prison. Now, this is the kind of guy who does genocide. Do not blanch before the term. This is the kind of guy who does forced starvation, okay? And by extension, Trump supports both. Now, let's say Netanyahu, in extremis, decides to brandish a nuclear weapon vis-a-vis Iran on the spurious claim that Iran is very, very close to a nuclear weapon. What is Trump going to do? Well, I don't know what Bibi Netanyahu has on Trump, but I suspect strongly that he also has a lot of blackmail material, Epstein and so forth. And that also, with a person like Trump, who also supports genocide and forced starvation, well, it looks like they're bound at the hip. So that's what creates for me a unknowable, really, really dangerous situation now. Hopefully, the latest trends with the Russian and the Chinese coming in and support big time for Iran, there's less likelihood that Israel will strike out. But if they strike out, well, you've got people like Kellogg and people like the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and others that reassure Trump, look, it'll be the same as last time. We can give the Iranians a really bad assassination survey or blow, and then what happens next? Well, as Garland has already said, last time around, the Israelis had to get Daddy Trump to bring them out of the impasse here, because they were going to almost get obliterated. Pardon the word. So there's so many loose ends here that the only thing that I would leave people with is this is so volatile that American people need to make known that we don't want any part of genocide or forced starvation, or worse still, Netanyahu doing something partly for his own political and personal reasons and getting Trump to go along with it.